Hello there guys, and welcome back to That Anxious Gamer. Today I'm going to be taking a look at Tasteless's reaction to the gameplay footage for Stormgate. My overall hope here, guys, is to give you a brief summary of what his thoughts are and give you my thoughts on what he thinks and my contribution. This is by viewer request. Ultimately, several viewers asked me to basically mesh together what all the pros think, what all the commentators think, and give an overall summary. So like a basically compilation of all of the streamers and pros' opinion on the gameplay reveal. Obviously, this is a monumental task. After doing a couple hours of research, I realized that this was going to be a huge undertaking. So what I'm going to be doing is doing a brief summary, a brief look at what each person is saying, and then eventually compile that all into one mega video. So I hope you guys like this. I hope this is something that's interesting to you. So let's get into it. So the first thing I wanted to check out, guys, is what Tasteless thought about the worker count, the starting worker count, and the macro base building. So take a look at this clip. This is very interesting, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts.
I was a minute 30 in. Okay. I do hope they don't do what they did in StarCraft 2, where you have, like, a lot of workers at the start. I think especially when you're talking about getting new people into a game, I think it's actually okay to give them like a few minutes to sort of process the game for beginners.
So this is a very interesting point, guys. I want to kind of reiterate what Tasteless said and give you my opinions. So you see right here on this mineral gold mine, you see that you have 8 out of 12 workers, 12 being the optimal amount. And you see on this other resource, you have up to 4 workers, right? So that's very similar to SE2, a little bit less on the minerals and a little bit more on the gas or Vespene gas equivalent. What I'm saying here, guys, though, this is what is interesting, is Tasteless is talking about how the game pace was abnormally fast in SE2. And that's an interesting point because the game pace wasn't always that fast. In Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm, because you had a 6-worker start, the game was actually much slower, and in my opinion, had a much more natural pace. What happened with Legacy of the Void is that Blizzard at that time wanted to prioritize the viewer experience and not the player's experience, so the game was sped up artificially. This had a number of really bad effects in StarCraft 2, like really hurting rushes in general. Rushes became much less strong when you started with 12 workers instead of starting with 6. So I think that what Tasteless is talking about is how that change basically actually hurt SE2, and he doesn't want to see that come to Stormgate, because you see what he's talking about is how he feels that he doesn't want the game to be artificially fast at the beginning. He wants it to kind of have a normal flow and feeling. I 100% agree with this, and I think that was one of the biggest problems with Legacy of the Void, and why you've seen people have a sharp drop in interest in the game after Wings of Liberty and Heart of the Swarm. Actually, Legacy of the Void, because of some of the changes, it increased the viewer's experience, but at the detriment of the player, which I think is never a good trade-off. So let's go on to the next clip.
I do like the fact that it does have a fast feel, although it doesn't feel as fast as StarCraft 2.
Okay, here, guys. This is a very interesting clip because here Tasteless is talking about the game pace, the time to kill, specifically in this situation where TLO is facing Monk. He's talking about the time to kill, which is a big thing that the community is discussing and debating right now. He's saying that it doesn't feel as fast as StarCraft 2, but it still feels pretty fast. Now, a lot of people may disagree with this, and I see a lot of people saying that the game is way too slow. It's not going to feel like StarCraft 2. It's basically Warcraft 3 levels of pacing. However, I'm going to show you another clip where Tasteless specifically talks about this. So let's go to that right now.
When people say Warcraft 3 damage, I almost feel like it's a little bit less. I would encourage those people that think it's Warcraft 3 level damage to go back and look at Warcraft 3 game. I think it's I think it's like 20-30% less damage than a Warcraft 3. Or 20-30% more damage. However, things die a little bit faster than Warcraft 3. Warcraft 3 things are a little bit tankier. Things seem to be moving a little bit quicker in this.
Okay, guys, so in this part of the clip, he talks about the Warcraft damage versus StarCraft 2. Now, at first, he does make a typo and basically says that it's less, but then he corrects himself and says that he would suggest people to actually go back and look, and they actually die quicker than Warcraft 3, about 20 to 30% quicker. I agree with this, guys. I think that that's probably the case. I don't think this game is going to be as slow as Warcraft 3, and I don't think it's going to be as fast as StarCraft 2. It's in the middle ground. It's somewhere in between those two. So I think this was a very relevant clip, and I think this is something that a lot of people would be interesting to know, because I think many people may have just missed this. And, obviously Tasteless is a very experienced RTS player, so I think he's probably fairly correct on this point. So let's go on to the next point.
What do you think of Age of Empires? Sorry, what do you think Age of Empires did wrong that Stormgate could avoid to be successful? Okay, so number.
Hey guys, I'm jumping into this right here. I think this is one of the most interesting points in the whole video, because I was hugely excited about AoE 4, and unfortunately AoE 4 I feel like never took off the way that it really deserved to. I feel like it had a lot of good points, but it just couldn't get itself off the ground. Let's see what Tasteless says about this, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts. So let's listen to this. This is one of the most interesting parts of the video.
One, you need to have a ladder, because that's what turned me off. You need to have people like me, and look, I mean, I'm no superstar in StarCraft, but I do like to compete. I did go to tournaments growing up. I do like laddering, as you guys noticed. I tend to just basically ladder all day versus try to find specific opponents and spar with them. People like me, we need to have a place where we can be ranked and try to constantly improve. I like seeing exactly where I'm at. I like watching myself develop and grow, so I think a ladder is essential. I think you need to have a couple big events and kind of debut that, so that you get kind of the esports excitement around the game. I think that was very successfully done in Korea and abroad. And you're certainly going to have a lot of RTS players who are going to be interested in doing that. One thing that I think Age did wrong, but I don't think you can change it, it's very grindy. It's like the early game is really fun, but it's really hard to finish people off. I think that StarCraft 1 and 2 probably have the best. Warcraft 3 is pretty good too, but you can end a game. That's like really important to do.
Okay, guys, and that's pretty much the end of that relevant part. What are my thoughts about it? What did AoE 4 do wrong? Number one, not having a ladder. He's absolutely right. Not having a ladder was a travesty, guys. It really hurt AoE 4. But another thing that he doesn't mention that I think was a big mistake is randomized maps, guys. Randomized maps, in my opinion, have no place in a competitive RTS. Obviously, whenever you're having an RTS, you want to feel like you won or lost the game based on your own merits. That's really important. Like competitive games in general, you want to feel like you were the one who won or lost the game, and you know what you can improve on for the next game. That's what drives that one more turn 4x like syndrome, and that's what keeps you playing. When you have a situation that there's a randomized map and you feel like luck is involved, I personally don't like gamble in RTS games, and I feel like when gamble comes in, when you have randomized elements, that hurts the game. So in my opinion, randomized maps was a huge flaw in AoE 4. They needed to have more, default maps at the beginning that you could learn those maps. You would learn exactly where everything is and basically go from there. I also think the units, what he's talking about, like not being able to end games, it's just AoE 4, the games kind of stretch out, but it doesn't feel like Heart of the Swarm where like you actually have a stalemate in the middle of the map. It just feels like a lot of times like you know who's winning, you know who's going to win, but you just can't finish the opponent off, which Tasteless did mention, and I agree with. So I think this point was very relevant to our discussion, and I think it was very interesting, because this is something that Stormgate definitely needs to avoid and do better than AoE 4 did, and I think they need to be going for more of a Warcraft 3 or StarCraft 2 feel, and this is one of the best things actually about Legacy of the Void, is you can generally end games very quickly, and you don't get into kind of stalemate situations, which, even though they're very interesting personally, I like them, a lot of people do not, and I understand that. So let's go to the next point.
I want to put on tournaments. Do you think StarCraft 2 pros would rather pick this up or go back to Brood War? I go back to my answer earlier. I think if there's I think certainly StarCraft 2 pros are going to be more inclined to do this than Brood War. The one game I'm not totally sure about is going to be StarCraft 1 seems to be so healthy in Korea. I don't know if you can ever, like, this would ever trump that. But, you know, if there's a lot of money and a big prize pool, I don't see why you wouldn't have, like, Flash and Bisu and Jaedong and those guys try it out.
Okay, guys, so this is a very interesting point. This is something a lot of people in the community talk about. Will pros be switching to Stormgate? Will we see, you know, the Marus, the Rogues, the SOSs of the world? Will we see Flash? Will we see Jaedong go into Stormgate? I'm going to tell you right now, guys, this is one of the biggest opinions I have. I feel like there's a very strong yes and there's a very strong no answer. And for me, it's yes. I absolutely feel that most pros will follow the money, just like Tasteless is talking about, and go to Stormgate. I do not believe most pros will stay with SC2. I think the SC2 pool, the price pool is going to be crushed. I think there's not going to be that much interest into it. I think some of the oldest pros will probably go back to Brood War because I feel like that's the game that has the best stability long term. And they may feel like, you know, I can't compete. I don't want to try to like completely, fight against a 16-year-old or a 14-year-old that's learning the game for the first time. I'm going to play it on stream, but I'm going to stick with Brood War. And I think most of the younger or middle-aged pros are going to absolutely switch to Stormgate. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind about this. And unfortunately for the StarCraft 2 community, I think that means that you're going to see the competitive community get smashed in, 50 to 75% will decrease in 1 year. I'm not even joking about this, guys. I feel it's going to be very dramatic. I feel like it's going to be very stark. I think you're going to see a extremely large 60 to 80% drop in the competitive SC2 scene in a single year. And this is as a 10-year player, as somebody that loves StarCraft 2. I just think Blizzard has kind of abandoned the game, and I don't think that most players will stay once Stormgate gets to a level of maturity, once it's out of beta, and the game is actually released in 2024. I think that very quickly Stormgate will convert most of the SC2 players. Some of the older players and some of the more classic RTS players will go back to Brood War. I think that will absolutely happen. I think these two games can coexist. I think the real loser in this equation is going to be StarCraft 2, just because I feel like most Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2, like professional players, professional level players, are going to be switching to Stormgate. So that's my opinion, and I would really like to hear your guys' opinion on this in the comments, because I think this is going to be maybe a hot take, something that's debatable, but I really believe saying 60 to 80% in 1 year is not even, I feel like that's conservative, honestly, guys. I feel like I wouldn't even be surprised to see something like 80 to 90% of pro SC2 players switch over.
Yeah, and I mean, I like the color palette as well. Definitely a massive improvement from the StarCraft 2 color palette, which I didn't even really notice was as bad until I started going back and watching like Warcraft 3 or even StarCraft 1. You know, there's a period in my career where I basically just did StarCraft 2 for like almost a decade exclusively.
So here, Tasteless is talking about the SC2 color palette and how that contrasts to Stormgate. Obviously, guys, Stormgate is going for a more colorful, more organic color palette. It's not going for the space theme quite as heavily. You're getting a much more organic, grounded, earthy color palette. I like it. I think it looks good. I love SC2's color palette. I don't think SC2 had a bad color palette. I actually disagree with Tasteless here. I don't think it was bad. However, it was not as broad maybe as some games. Hopefully they bring in some oranges here, they bring in some pinks, they bring in some more vibrant colors. I would love to see some more pastels and just have a broader color palette in general, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that we should make ridiculous maps that look like something like out of Cyberpunk, but what I'm saying is that I think having a little bit more of that, maybe having one Cyberpunk based map, something that was a little bit broader of a color palette and a little bit brighter would be really good.